Today, we're going to look at the federal government's plan with the BC government to turn vacant condos in Vancouver into affordable housing and whether or not that seems to be a good idea.
My opinion, that's going to be a pretty bad idea and a kettle of worms.
What if they were going to give you one of those condos, Corey?
Well, maybe, but the problem is very systemic, and it's deeper than what is really being discussed. And I hope to bring out some of the issues, like people. Uh, the value of the property is how your municipal tax is set. So if the condos go down in price, so does the revenue to your municipality. And we've had a real estate bubble, a housing bubble, since about 2006 when prices tripled in less than a few months. And BMO was involved here in Calgary with a lot of claims of uh, participating in the value of the houses going up astronomically by various means. And there was, I think you might be able to fill in more about the BMO fiasco of 2006, 2007.
Well, they essentially they got caught up putting out too many mortgages. And a lot of the people they were funding, they criticized as being, token straw buyers.
Right.
And of course, they blamed the legal profession for that, saying that the lawyers owed a duty to the bank to make sure the bank's investments were safe.
Yeah, so what I tried to point out was there's an underlying systemic problem, and part of it has to do with the banking. Part of it has to do with the justice system not protecting against overinflated basic fraud on valuation, and it has to do with the federal and provincial and municipal governments not regulating the industry. And I think it goes back to the uh, and we also got to include in it the banks, because the banking laws are in question as well. So when you start looking at the whole picture, we see that there's money to be made by the wealthy off of real estate, and they figured there was going to be no backlash because the average homeowner would see the value go up. But what the people didn't realize, when the value of your house goes up, so did your monthly and yearly costs, because now everything inflated, and up went your property taxes, your education taxes based on a percentage of value. And if you see since 2005, 2007, there's been a steady increase above the rate of inflation on the tax values, because the municipalities and the provincial government, even the federal government, are spending more and more and more. And that's sort of the underlying essence of the problem. And that's sort of where I wanted to focus on this episode is, what do you feel that, as a homeowner or non-homeowner, do you feel that there's a crisis in the housing industry? We're just going to talk about the condo crisis in Vancouver, but when you look at the big picture, it's just part of the problem. So,
I think there's several things going on here. You build condos on spec. They take 5, potentially 10 years to get one online, especially these
less
high-rise
than that,
condos.
I think it's less than
Well,
that, but
well, the thing is, you first of all you have to assemble the land, and in
yeah,
a city like Vancouver or Toronto, there's not much in the available land, and then you have to make sure that the infrastructure is in place to add another 1,000 or 2 people to a local area. Then you need to get all your approvals and everything else, banking and everything in place in the construction. So it's a fairly long-term
well,
commitment
to
to get
build a
a condo.
condo, you got to realize you're going to have lots of sewage. You're going to need lots of water depending on the number of units. So when you're looking at the infrastructure to build a condo, you're starting to see the cost in municipality and the province go up, because now you got to get power, you got to have more electric grid going to that building. So a little more planning has to go into it, and the costs are borne over the life of the building. But what people forget is that this building is a depreciating asset, and that's something that's not taken into this greed factor of speculation on homes and investing in homes and businesses wanting to rent these homes out to home renters that should be home buyers. If you can afford rent, you can obviously afford to buy it. So there's a big underlying issue there as well. And the cost to build is something that municipalities and provincial governments and federal governments have been looking at, saying, oh, we can reduce the costs. Well, in BC, they were talking reducing the cost by 50% on to $40,000 or up to $40,000 on each new building. Well, that's really not that significant amount of money when you consider that they're going to be taxing that property for the life of the property. So it's a door tax on the condominium units that's going to make the municipality and province money. So why the front end load? You don't need the front end load unless you're mismanaging resources and income from the municipality and the province. So that's something that I find dubious, and I think it's one of the systemic problems in the real estate industry right now.
Well, the problem is it's too damn expensive.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. It costs way too much for everybody to have a single family home. And that was at one time what people considered standard. They wanted a 1,500 square foot house on a lot with a double garage attached. Yeah. Everybody wanted that. And the thing is,
everybody has a right to that as far as I'm concerned. And the day they didn't control inflation to the point where your wages went up and indexed to the annual inflation, that's where the problem manifested and festered, and now we're seeing the pus from the results, right? It's oozing out everywhere.
So anyways, back to the amount of time it takes to build a condo. According to the internet, the condo can take anywhere from 2.5 to 5 years to build a 10-story condo. So it's years behind. Now you have all this inventory sitting on the market that has not sold. So the question is, how much is it worth? And if you're going to purchase it to subsidize housing for people who obviously don't have houses, how are you going to choose who those people will be and how much they'll pay?
Well, right now, sitting on the market in Vancouver, they estimate between 4,300 and 4,500 condominiums sitting empty in the market. And the federal government and the provincial government and the municipality, I'm sure, is involved as well, are talking on a program to buy 2,200 of the units for low-income families. Well, if we start doing the numbers of all that, that's a big project. And what is really the underlying issues that's going to affect the citizens of Vancouver? And I'm sure it's going to spill out to Alberta and Ontario, because if they do it once, they're going to have to do it all across the country.
Here's the thing. How much are you going to sell these units for to make them affordable?
Well, the average unit is $1 million. Condo unit is about $1 million in the Vancouver area. Now, is taxpayers going to pay $1 million for the condo? Or should the speculator that made money all these years, I mean, they're not new businesses, they've been making money left, right, and center for decades over this high price scenario with properties going up and up and up. They've made nothing but profits. So are they going to take a financial loss on this like they should in a fair market scenario, or is this subsidy just going to enrich them? And we know that the rich and the wealthy fund the politicians. So is there any corruption in and behind this deal? And I say yes, there has to be. You got to follow the money. There seems to be the wealthy getting all the privilege and the rest of us getting the shaft.
I want to know how they use the words convert into affordable housing. Does that mean they take out all the gold doorknobs and all the chandeliers and put cheap features, take out the two-door fridge and put in a single pull fridge like the good old days? Like how are you going to prepare these units to make them affordable?
I don't know. In BC, the Nonprofit Housing Association slammed the BC government for the plan to help developers because just months after it axed the community housing fund, a decision put thousands of affordable rental units in jeopardy. So in one hand, you've got affordable housing being cut by, billions of dollars, and you've got another industry being bailed out for billions of dollars. So I find that appalling and hypocritical that this is going on or allowed to go on. So,
Well, I can understand the desire to make housing less expensive. I just can't understand how you're going to do it with 2,000 units in a city the size of Vancouver and Toronto. How are you going to select these people, the lucky winners of the lottery to get a discounted condo? And the people that live in the buildings already who have paid, I presume, full price for theirs are going to be sitting there going, okay, now they've just lowered the value of my condo by selling a condo for less, which possibly would have happened anyways with results of the oversupply. But it's going to be there's too many things that need to be worked out to say whether this is a good or a bad idea. Are they going to be paying a bank rate on the mortgages for the difference in the balance? And if they couldn't afford a Vancouver condo, how are they going to afford a government subsidized one? Like how much is it going to be subsidized? What's the downstroke going to be? It's too many questions.
It's like I said, it's a pus oozing out of a wound that was allowed to happen because the wealthy allowed the unchecked increase in property values across the country from 2006 on, and it wasn't indexed to inflation for the wages of earners, and it was about greed and capital to keep a economy going, because the housing economy is one of the few things that we in Canada have now in terms of profitability and stimulation to the economy, because each unit that's being built creates jobs, and that was a priority. But even the wages of these jobs haven't gone up since 2006 to keep up with inflation and the cost of housing. And I think when you look at inflation, is housing affordable? I mean, can your average wage afford a house? And I say no. And I'd like to look under the rock a bit and see why that is.
So anyways, Polyev thinks it's a bad idea. And he's come up with some, really unique phrases. You gotta love the one-liner.
Axe attack.
Yeah, no, you gotta love the one-liners that they come up with.
Talk is cheap. It takes money to buy whiskey, and it takes action to prove that you know what you're doing, and that's something we haven't seen.
Well, I think it'd be more productive rather than just criticize how they're rewarding the rich and moving the debt onto the poor. And you can argue that when you planned your condo, you planned a continuing condo market. Obviously, it's now crashed, so it's now time for you to pay the piper and perhaps lose your building and buck up on some personal guarantees. And the government's going to bail you out by buying these units off your hands and putting them back on the market. Now, it sounds like a good idea if you get one of these,
No.
But how are they going to choose? Are they going to choose new Canadians? Are they going to choose senior citizens? Are they going to choose people with families? Or are they going to have a lottery?
The conservatives will target that immigrants got all the condos. The immigrants got all the condos. I mean, that's
Well,
going to be the rally cry of these religious fanatics.
Polyev keeps saying that, the liberals are just bailing out their friends.
Yeah,
But, usually the condo developers, land developers are dying the wool conservatives, because the
right.
conservatives are the ones that give them all the goodies and give them
Yeah,
all the tax breaks. So I find it interesting that he's kind of speaking against his constituency and trying to appeal to the common person and to their greed. Like,
yeah.
you're not going to get one of these,
Oh
but you're
no,
going to have,
I'd love to move to Vancouver. I mean, it's
you're not going
warmer
to get one
weather
of
than
these,
Alberta,
and you're going to have
and
to help pay for it. So
yeah,
he's appealing to people's sense of greed. Like, why should my neighbor get one when I don't get one? And
well, now let's look at the business model of that. I mean, if they're going to bail out a business, I mean, as a businessman, I go on the speculation that I'm going to build another condominium unit, because this is not their first kick at the rodeo. You don't do these big condos being a newbie in the industry. So you've made profits off of other condos, and you've speculated on prices going to the moon and back, so everything's going to go up in price, and that's what you speculated on. And now you find out that it can't be moved on the market, and yet there's high demand. So what's the rule of business? Well, you're supposed to be priced by demand. Well, there's high demand, so the price should be up, but it's unaffordable, so the price has to go down. That's fair market valuation for a business. Should we, the taxpayer, bail out these profitable businessmen? I mean, you can't walk into a bank and say, I want to do a $20 million project for a housing development without having the financial resources backing you on the play. So, I mean, if you could, I'd walk in and be building condos. The bank would have to loan me the money, and I'd just go build it. And it's easy to do. You just got to contract contractors. So when we look at the business model, if the government pays, well, how much? 500,000 a unit for the average price being $1 million? It's still going to cost taxpayers $1.1 billion for the bailout. That's half price. And the contractor would lose some money. If they paid 750,000 a unit, that's $1.6 billion to taxpayers. And if they paid market value of $1 million, that's $2.2 billion we're paying for these condominium units. And my question to the viewers is, if we're in a market bubble, a housing bubble where the prices are way higher than affordability, and you've got the United States blocking the Strait of Hormuz and bombing Iran again, do you really think that the economy of the world is going to uphold and stay vibrant? No. We're in a precipice where the market corrections are probably coming sooner than later. So now we invest $1.1 billion at half value, 500,000 a unit. We still stand a chance of losing 50% of the valuation, because the market crash will happen eventually. So in 1979, there was a market crash here in Alberta. By 1983, the property values were almost half the price. So if that happens, when we bail out these condominium developers, we're going to lose money as taxpayers. And anybody that buys one of these units off of the federal government is going to lose money. So it's probably not a wise investment. But if those 4,000 units were put on the open market, prices would adjust fairly quickly. I mean, that's a significant amount of units. And let's say they foreclosed on them, they'd be put up to auction, and they go to the highest bidder. Well, that's going to bring the market valuation way down, and it could be the precipice of a market crash. So we have to be careful in what we look at. Now, on the other hand, we have to look at, well, if we bail out these developers and we say we give them, $2.2 billion to cover their costs, they'll run out and they'll go build more condominiums thinking, well, if we can't make profit on it, the government will bail us out again. And that creates another problem. It creates a false market condition because they're running out, replacing those condos with profitable condos again, and it can create a vicious cycle where the federal government's going to have to bail them out a second or third time, and I don't think it solves the underlying systemic issues of the cost and profiteering in the housing industry, which is another issue that I'd like to touch on, is condominium units sell the units of a building. And that building, once it's built, is called a depreciating asset. It goes down in value. It's not going up. And the reason it goes down is because the building is aging. And eventually that building's going to have to be blown up, especially with the modern building techniques we're using, slap them up as fast as we can. One of my things about that really gets under my craw in the condo industry is the condo has condo fees, and the average condo fee is $500 to $800 in Vancouver, which is significant. That's like a $200,000 mortgage payment monthly. So what happens is when the condo is being built and you're selling a brick in the wall of a condo, you're taking the profits off the top as an investor or speculator in building the building. You want your 40-year profit or 50-year profit of the building all in one lump sum right as soon as the building is built. And you're passing the depreciation value onto the sucker that bought the condominium unit. And what happens over time is you're having to pay this condo fee to replace and repair and maintain the building. But if you didn't allow the apartments within the building to be sold off, the original owner of the building has to take the profits and proceeds to maintain his asset and hold the value. So it's not coming out of your pocket, it's coming out of the profits of the 50-year profits of that building to the owner of the building. And now, if he wants to sell that entire building to some other investor, the same principle applies, and the price doesn't really get too high because the businessmen know the costs and the revenue generated from the building, and they're not taking a front-end load to line their pockets off the profits. And that's that's part of government regulations that allowed this selling a brick in a building, and that's caused significant problems. And everybody turned a blind eye to it because the municipalities make more taxes. They charge about $5,000 to $6,000 a year for each door in that condo, which is another issue.
Corey, you lost me.
Yeah.
You said that the person who owns the condo building.
Yeah.
Okay, so who owns the condo building?
Well, that's the point, is that they've allowed them to be no owner. And what happens is they build it and then they sell all the units. So the owner should have to be, there should only be one owner.
Well, the condo association's the owner.
Well, no, they're the management contract to the building. They're not the owners. The owner is the person that built the building in the first place, and they're walking with all the profits from the building up front. I mean, they're going to make at least $100,000 to $200,000 per unit that they sell. So they're taking the asset and running with all the profits. That profit out of in a business model would be that they have a apartment building where they're collecting rent from each unit. And that unit rent is their investment and their gain, the profit return for that building.
What's the difference between a person who builds a 3-story apartment building and a person who builds a 3-story condo building? What's the difference?
The difference is that the owner of the apartment building has to do the maintenance and the care of the building for the life of the building, and it's a depreciating asset, and they cover the costs of operation, and they're not taking a front-hand load off the apartment building. So
Okay, so if you sell each and every unit to every individual, those individuals aren't responsible for the ground maintenance. They're not responsible for the replacement of the roof. They're not responsible
they
for,
are through the condo association. And that's,
but not individually, collectively, yes.
yes.
Ju-
And,
Just
and
like, just like if it was owned by one person or a condo
no, it's
association.
different. It's different. If
I
one
don't
person,
understand.
yeah, well, it's a business model. If one
Okay, tell
person
me.
owns that building, if one person owns the building,
Yes.
then you're responsible for that building. Now, you can't overprice for rent, right? You're going to have empty suites if you price it out of the market. But that isn't the case when you're selling individual units. You can price them at whatever because people want a roof over their head, and your condo fees can go up annually as well. So the tenants have really little control over the fees of the condo. And in the business model, you should never allow the front end taking of if you're taking the profits out of the building right at the start, that means you're passing the liability onto the apartment condo owner. If the building is owned by one company, the apartment is the asset that has to be leased out, and the rate that you return is the rental that you're making from the person renting. So your business model is going to be such that you're going to ensure that your apartment is rented out. You're going to have happy tenants. You're not going to gouge them. You're not going to rape and pillage them, and you're going to try to keep them there. So the business model is different. And when you sell the condo unit, you have no liability for that. You've walked with all the money, and you're going to try to make profit off the unit. So you're going to up the price, and now you couldn't. The rent for that same unit would be way lower than your mortgage payments on that same unit. So you're inflating the whole scenario.
Well, yeah, there's a bit of truth to that. But when I sell my condo unit for a profit, I get to keep the profit.
And when you sell your condo unit at a loss and it's sitting empty, like in Vancouver, you're going to have the government bail you out.
No, but that's what happens. But when I'm in a rental apartment and somebody puts the rental up,
then you go find a cheaper rent or one that you want. So that's the model. But the depreciating value of the property, at some point that building is going to be blown up, and the last sucker on the pyramids of the apartment scam is going to lose the money. So that's the problem with the condo situation. Is it's fine for the first 10 years of the building, and then if the building construction codes weren't very good, or you have tremors or earth shifting underneath it, and your apartment becomes unsafe and they got to tear down the building, you lost. Or 50, 60 years from now, the building is unrepairable, you lose because you're the owner, the building's torn down, and guess what? You lost your investment. So it's sort of like a pyramid scheme. The condo situation is just like a pyramid scheme because those buildings are depreciating assets. They're not going to be here 200 years from now. So the last man in the pyramid that owns the apartment loses. But if the apartment is owned by one owner, he maintains and takes his profit over time and maintains the value of the profit. And over the life of the building, he's made nothing but profit. So when the building life is up, the building he already made him profit, so he can replace the building. And that's the difference in the business modeling. And we can get into all sorts of technical issues with that, but the real point is that condos should never be allowed. It should be one building, one owner, and there's many rational reasons why. And the municipalities don't like that because it's a door tax where they can base it off the value of the apartment price. So you've got underlying issues that will facilitate always wanting to sell condos. And I'm sure there's a lot of condo owners out there that would comment, how much money did you lose on your condo? Because the building needed repairs and you got a front end load of $50,000 for renovation that you were unaware that the building was deteriorated. So those are the issues, and I think the government has to step in and say, if we want affordable housing, we have to go back to you can't own a brick in a wall. And we're missing a few bricks in our wall behind us. So we might know what we're talking about.
Well, I kind
Or a
of
few
disagree.
bricks in my head missing, but
I
whatever.
kind of disagree. I think
Well,
the economics of a
you
condo
owned a
building.
condo. You owned a condo at one time, and
Yeah.
I would never own a condo because of that simple fact is that the building is deteriorating and the condo fees are too much of a burden on the owner. You're just passing the buck to the person owning it, and everything isn't going to go up, up, and up. And condo values, when they start crashing, there's going to be a lot of people losing their money, and they're still on the hook for the condo association fees that really are, should have been the responsibility of the apartment owner and not individual unit owners. So there's the fundamental difference.
It gets spread around regardless.
No,
Like
there's a
if
better way.
I
There's a better way of doing it than what they're doing, and it keeps the values down. It keeps the prices realistic instead of inflated prices, and you're getting nothing in return other than a roof over your head and more bills. So
you're telling me that if we all had rental units instead of condos, we'd all be better off.
in many cases, you probably would, because the rent would be cheaper than the mortgage, and you have more disposable income, which floats back into the economy. So yes, there are values to everything, and you could save for a down payment on a house. But this issue is much bigger. I mean, we can do one on the residential issues as well, like segregation subdivisions, where they do not want low-income housing in it. It's very systemic around Calgary and Alberta, where the rich want to be only surrounded by the rich and the wealthy, so they want certain sizes of houses and certain quality of construction to make it, hold the value of the neighbor's house. So this segregation subdivision model is also part of the inflationary aspects of property valuations, and the municipalities go along with it because of the mill rate, which is a percentage of the value of the property. So the up goes their revenue, so they can squander it on peace bridges and all sorts of other, given $1.2 billion to build a new stadium for a billionaire and blown up an $800 million perfectly good stadium, so it costs taxpayers $2 billion, but they like that mill rate so that they get bigger cash flow. And people bitch about all their taxes going up. Well, let's start looking at what's the root of the problem, and you can't just change one little aspect. You got this problem is so systemic, you have to change the whole dynamics of the system. And we're just touching on one topic of the iceberg. The rest is under the water. So we got to show some rational thought as to why this is wrong, and we should be looking at ways of improving it. And that is a hard thing for people to accept, because people want to make money off of condos. Like you agree that condos, buying a brick in a wall is fine, but in reality, it is not fine. It has inherent problems that bite you in the arse down the road, and maybe you didn't get, hooked with that, but a lot of people have in the condo industry, and they know exactly what I'm talking about.
So go rent.
I do.
If you don't want a condo, go rent.
There's a bunch of studies done that renting, you're further ahead sometimes renting than actually buying. And that's because of the inflationary pressures and the high bank rates and the costs of everything else, and what's going to happen when the bubble bursts. And the bubble is going to burst. I mean, if you have to bail out condo owners that are sitting empty, that means the bubble's about to burst. So is taxpayers going to be on the hook when the prices drop even below what the government bails out the condo owners for? Just because people are without homes does not mean the real estate values are not going to come down.
Corey, this is the
affordable
first
cost.
time, this is the first time I've heard you agree with Polyev.
Well, I'm not really agreeing with a lot of his stuff, but he doesn't have a solution because he's just putting a Band-Aid on his talk. I'm showing here's some solutions, and here I can show you the legislation and how to change it so that it's a long-term solution to a problem that they want to keep around because it gives them talking points. You know, Polyev wants to keep it in place because it gives them, you know, talking points, axe the tax, and, you know, all sorts of stuff. So it's you know, we can talk about it till we're blue in the face, but the reality is if you're not taking meaningful action to solve the problem, you'll never solve the problem. Politicians do not want the problem solved because the wealthy benefit from it, and they pay for the politicians to be elected. So, and like I said at the beginning of the podcast, there's a whole underlying system of checks and balances that have to be changed from how the Banking Act works. How, you know, why should these businesses get lines of credit to buy a house when you have to pay a mortgage to buy a house unless you're wealthy? And a mortgage should be almost illegal because you're paying interest on interest in advance of paying on your principal, which is ripping you off. You ended up paying twice the money, and on a line of credit, you only have to pay the interest payments, and you can pay any amount to lower the principal. So there's a big difference in what it's costing you to buy a home, and that should be illegal. If you have loans, they should be the same conditions for everybody. Not the poor have to pay double the triple the cost of borrowing money than the wealthy. No, that's not right. That's not fair. And it makes it so I couldn't bid against a contractor that has a line of credit on a house. He just outbids me, keeps bidding it up, and that's a pricing war. And you're going to lose out because you have restrictions because of paying interest on interest in advance on a mortgage. Line of credit guy can run the cost up without really hurting the overall cost of the purchase. So yeah, there's lots of issues. We could get into that in other episodes, but anything else that's on this condo issue? Yay, nay? You for it? You for them buying it out?
Not enough information.
Yeah, we don't even know the price they're going to pay for the unit.
Yeah.
So there's the other problem is smoke and mirrors, folks. You know, they're blowing smoke up our arses, and guess what? It's going to cost us money. I think I'd rather try to solve the problem totally, which is let's deal with the root of the matter and the foundations of the problems in the housing industry right across the board. And, you know, that's a big issue, but it's actually quite easy to deal with when you understand the Banking Act. You have to change that. You have to change how you allow contractors to speculate in the industry, and you have to allow people to, you know, actually be able to go in, buy a piece of raw land and build their own building. And those things are all blocked by the wealthy and the laws. So if you really truly want to fix a problem, you have to change the laws and regulations and how we do things and allow people, like, I can go build a house, but I can't because they're blocking access to funds, land, and regulations prevent me from doing it, when in fact building a house is quite easy. If you allow the banks to have to you know, afford me a line of credit so I can go do it. And that's the difference. If I have to do it under a mortgage, it's just not economically viable. And the regulations don't allow you to buy raw land. The banks don't want to fork out money for raw land. So there's why you can't have an individual like me go buy raw land, because you have there's no mortgage. They won't give you a line of credit, so you got to pay cash for the land. So you're blocked right at the start. They'll give you loans to build the building, but they won't give you money to buy the raw land. So when you start looking at the whole picture, you see there's a real problem, and it always favors the wealthy to line their pockets at your expense. And that's even in the housing industry. Condo industry, it's even worse. I personally, I would never ever recommend buying a condo, because there's too many nightmares of these condo owners, especially in a 10-year or older building, getting stuck with costs and, it's just, I've heard of nightmares. I've had people I know get caught up in nightmares with condos, and stay away. That's my recommendation. Stay the hell away. So I don't know. You have a different opinion, I take it.
Well, not necessarily.
Well, we do
I
need
just-
we do need to
I-
get to the root of the problem and solve it. I mean, and that's not happening.
So here's the real bottom line. You've got thousands of empty condos ready to go on the market. The market is declining. No new condos will be built in that 2.5 to 5 year span, maybe following 2 or 3 years until the market comes back. Which
Well, I don't
means
know.
that
They're still building new condos. They're doing it on spec, and the banks are backing, and the wealthy are backing, because they've talked of the bailouts, but they're still building units because there's a lot of profits in units if and when they sell. So
I'm just not sure of that, Corey.
yeah, well, you don't get 4,500 vacant units in a city the size of Vancouver without more condos on the go. Like, they're not, because of the timelines, they're not stopping projects from moving forward. They're just put in a position where they could lose money right now. And I think let them lose their shirts, and let's see the correction come in the real estate industry. There's a lot of reasons for it.
According to the internet, the CMHC says housing starts are down.
Could be. But
Well,
they're not down to zero. You had a housing start boom. 2-3 years ago, they overbuilt the condos, and now they can't sell them because they're too high a price. So if they'd have been selling them at fair prices, they wouldn't be empty, and there'd be more condos being built. So what come first, the chicken or the egg? It's a vicious cycle, and guess what? Governments, municipalities, provincial governments, and federal all in on the problem, but they're not coming up with the solutions. And the banks are in on the problems as well, and who they give money to and how they're giving money out. So and you got to remember, folks, like, for every $1,000 in deposit at a bank, the federal government allows them to borrow from the federal treasury 10 times that money. So basically, they're lending out money from us. And so, yeah, it's a vicious cycle. There's the capitalism in there is screwing over most of us in the housing industry, and we keep bailing these people out. I see it as a vicious cycle of enriching the wealthy at our own peril and our own cost. And this market correction from the 2006 bubble still hasn't happened. And do we continue bailing it out? That's my question to you. You want to keep bailing out speculators and the wealthy that are building these condos and houses with your tax dollars?
No, I think at some point you took a risk.
Yeah.
The market turned. You had a good 15 years where you made a ton of money, and now it's a slight downturn. The question becomes, for the bigger picture, is whether or not a downturn in the economy and a housing crash is good for Canada.
Well, here's the problem is, since the mill rate is based on the percentage value of the house, the houses assessment values are gonna crash the minute the market crashes on housing.
They just
And
increase
there's
the
a
mill rate.
problem in and of itself, right?
Corey,
Your
they
house
just
drops-
increased, no, they just increased the mill rate.
Right, so up
It,
go
it
your
doesn't,
taxes.
it's a fool's game, right?
Yeah,
The taxes will stay the same, but the mill rate will go up.
right. And that's something that, you know, it's bailing out these wealthy people that are doing speculation for profit, and they've made huge profits, is only bailing out the banks and the wealthy investors, and that's at our peril, and it will make it so fewer people actually get into housing. It will exacerbate the problems because now the price is still high and affordability becomes an issue, and wages really haven't kept up with inflation, so that's the problem. I guess that's about it. I got nothing else to say on condo issues other than do not buy a condo anywhere. A fool's game. It's a pyramid scam because the building, the last guy owning the brick in the building, as it's got to be blown up, gets stuck with all the losses. My take on it. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Subscribe to the channel, give us a like, and please share the video. Don't be afraid to share this commercial with your friends too.